A long, long time ago, when man spoke in grunts and wrote in pictures, we were one people.
And we shared the same stories of gods, both good and evil,
Of tricksters and spirits,
the cunning of animals, and the strength of heroes.
our stories taught us where we came from, what to fear, and how we should treat one another.
Then slowly, as we grew in numbers,
We began to break apart.
apart,
Some tribes went north,
some south,
some west,
some east, and the tales began to change.
Anansi brought us stories, and Loki, fire to tell them by.
Hercules captured Cerberus, and Rama defeated Ravana.
Baba Yaga flew on her mortar, while Circe turned men to swine.
Yaxus guarded the forest floors, where we passed wary of boloko bells.
We all kept watch for the evil eye, though we called it many names.
Slowly, separately, our stories and our cultures formed and changed, molded to our new environments and the situations that we faced.
In all of these differences, we began to forget that we were once one people.
The stories, however, remember. A long time ago,
And continents apart,
in a forest ashram on the banks of the Malini River,
in a merchant's house overlooking the great North Sea,
lived a girl named Shakuntala.
lived a girl named Alvina.
Shakuntala was the daughter of the celestial spirit Menka and the great sage Vishwamitra. The sage was getting too powerful in his meditations, and the god Indra sent Menka to distract him. The two had an affair, but when Vishwamitra discovered her intentions, he was furious. He renounced Menka and their daughter and sent them away. As the child was mortal, Menka was unable to take her to the heavens with her, and so she left her alone in the forest under the protection of Shakunta birds.
Alvina's mother was her father's whole world, so much that when she died giving Alvina life, he fell into an inconsolable grief. He was so filled with sadness that to shed even one tear for his lost love or his motherless child was too much for him to bear. And so he shut his heart and his door. His voyages to sell and trade his wares grew further and further apart as he spent more of his time at his window, gazing out at the sea, a monumental statue to times gone by. The less the merchant traveled, the more the household was forced to give up. And the servants grew bitter as many of them were forced to seek work elsewhere. Alvina grew up alone, with only an old nurse for company.
The child was not alone for long, as the songs of the birds led Ganva Rishi to her. Overcome with compassion and impressed with the way the forest animals doted on her, the sage named the child Shakuntala, after the birds that cared for her, and brought her to his nearby ashram, raising her as if she were his own daughter. As she grew, she flourished in the peaceful ways of the ashram. Ganva Rishi taught her meditation and care for herself, the plants and the animals, while the many visitors taught her about the world that lay beyond the forest and the river.
The nurse cared for Alvina as well as the other servants would allow, saving her bread and scraps, teaching her to read and write, and giving her old petticoats to wear. The townspeople, seeing only a lean, ragged girl, taunted and neglected Alvina, giving her the name Tattercoats. As she grew, Alvina began to take on the work of the depleted staff, spending her days scrubbing the pots and washing the linens.
tending the forest animals, and fulfilling the duties of the ashram, never complaining, and day by day becoming even more beautiful despite the toil. Then one day, King Dushyant, a great hunter and warrior, went hunting through the nearby forest and shot her favorite deer. Shakuntala came to its rescue, and the king was so taken by her beauty that he agreed to stay at the ashram and help nurse the animal back to health. While he was there, they fell in love, and Dushyant asked Shakuntala to marry him. She was overjoyed by the thought of becoming his wife, but could not agree because she needed the consent of her father, Ganbarishi, who was away for a few months from the ashram. But Dushyant was not willing to wait, and in his eagerness to make Shakuntala his wife, he proposed that they marry according to Gandharva custom. This would allow them to be witnesses to their own marriage. And so they married and spent a beautiful time together in the forest.
Understanding his isolation more than any, Alvina befriended an old goose herd who was also forgotten by the town, taking breaks from her work to visit him in the field and share what little bread and cheese she had with him. In return, the man would play the most beautiful music on his flute, and she would dance. She would dance through her hunger, she would dance through the cold, and pretty soon her heart would be lifted, and she would find herself dancing joyfully with only the noisy geese for partners.
Weeks passed, and King Dushyant knew he must return to his kingdom. And so he turned to Shakuntala. I must return to my duties as king. I will send for you when my palace is ready to receive you as queen. Take my ring as a token of my faithfulness. He placed the ring on her finger, kissed her, and rode away. Time passed, and Shakuntala was so lost in her thoughts of love for Dushyant that she began to neglect her duties. And when the visiting sage Durvasa asked for water, she did not give it to him.
She was unkind.
Are you always kind? Durvasa was proud of his status and well known for his temper. In a rage, the sage cursed Shakuntala that whoever she was dreaming about would forget her forever. Shakuntala was crushed, but her friends pleaded on her behalf so that the sage took pity on her. He changed the curse so that it could be broken by showing a token he had given her. Not long after, Shakuntala found that she was with child.
As Alvina reached womanhood, the king announced that he would be traveling to a nearby town. He was getting older and feared his son would not find a bride. Princess after princess had been brought to meet the young man, but they had all been turned away. Some were haughty and shallow, others too delicate. Still others seemed to care only for themselves, glancing more at their own reflections than they did at the prince. If I am to choose a bride who would one day be queen, he pleaded, shouldn't her character be more important than her wealth? And so the king invited all of the people of the kingdom to a grand ball, hoping of all of the single women in attendance, the prince might favor one.
When Ganva Rishi returned from his travels, and Dushyant had not yet sent for her, Shakuntala was dismayed. But Ganva Rishi just smiled. If you truly love one another, there is nothing to be ashamed of. Your heart is strong, and if the promises he gave you were true, then you should go to him, and your child will be heir to his kingdom. Hearing this advice, she gathered provisions and soon set out with her father and companions.
Alvina had never before been invited to anything in her life, and the grand ball filled her with hope. If she could only go and dance among others in the kingdom who did not know her only as Tattercoats. Perhaps she could find a friend there, or at least forget herself for a while. Certain no one would let her into the palace in rags, Alvina begged to borrow a dress to go and see the king. But the old nurse had nothing left for her. Filled with sorrow and shame, Alvina ran to her friend the gooseherd, who had become like a grandfather to her.
On the way across a river, Shakuntala, lost in her wishes and dreams, did not feel the king's ring slip from her finger into the cool water. Neither did she notice the great fish carrying it away.
The gooseherd wiped away Alvina's tears and picked up his flute. He winked at her and said, with the right music, even an old man like me might be able to dance all the way to the palace. He played the merriest tune Alvina had ever heard, and she could not help but dance. She danced through her sorrow. She danced through her shame. And pretty soon her heart was filled with strength and joy as she and the gooseherd went skipping down the road towards the town with the geese before them and her tattered dress all but forgotten. Before Alvina and her friend had gone far, a handsome young man in princely attire rode up on his horse and greeted them, asking the way to where the king was staying. When he found that they were headed in the same direction, he decided to get off of his horse and walk with them a while. The gooseherd smiled and played a new tune, soft and low and sweet, and the stranger and Alvina began to talk. They talked of their lives, they talked of their dreams, and pretty soon the young man was blinded to Alvina's bare feet and tattered dress, noticing instead her lovely smile, her wit, and the graceful way she moved.
Shakuntala arrived at the palace full of love and expectations. But sage Durvasa's curse had blinded the king's eye, and Dushyant did not recognize her. The forest, the deer, the ashram, and their love were cast from his mind, and he saw only her hermit's clothing and lack of jewels. He greeted her with the indifference of a stranger, and when he heard her story and her pleas, he did not believe her. "Women are cunning," he said. "How should I believe that the story you give is true, and that the child you carry is mine, when I have no memory of you?" Shakuntala's heart was shattered, but her upbringing had given her wisdom and grace. "How could you forget the time we spent in my forest? If women are cunning, then what were the sweet words you whispered to me as we lay together under the stars? O shameless king, were your promises to me so weak that a simple curse could break them so easily? I will not stay where I am unwanted, and I do not seek your wealth. May the goddess Durga, who fought and vanquished great evils, protect me now from your heart of stone, and guide the good king I married back to me, when he is ready to love as I am worthy." Though her head was high, her heart split more with every step as Shakuntala traveled back to the Malini River. As it was uncustomary for a married woman to live with her father, she did not return to the ashram, and instead made home in a nearby village for herself and her son.
The The young man begged Alvina to marry him, but she knew from his attire and their talk that he was the prince himself. And so she admonished him, "Don't make fun of poor Tattercoats. The whole kingdom is coming to see you. You should have a lady for your queen, not a goose girl." But the more she refused him, the sweeter the pipe played.
Time passed. Shakuntala still missed the man she had married in the forest, but it was time to stop letting daydreams get in the way of her responsibilities. Her love for her son and her community surpassed any love Dushyant could have promised her. She grew in strength as well as beauty, and over time, she became a good mother and a respected member of her village.
To prove his intentions and his love, the prince invited Alvina and her friend to the royal ball, where he would welcome her, just as she was, and announced to all who gathered that she, of all the ladies, was the one he would dance with.
One year, a few weeks before the Navratri festival, the palace cook served King Dushyant a great fish. As he cut it open, he was amazed to find his own ring gleaming inside. The curse was broken. Memories rushed in as King Dushyant remembered Shakuntala, their meeting in the forest, their wedding, and how much he loved her. He fell to his knees in grief as he remembered her words from long ago, when she had come to him pregnant with his child. But he got up with new resolve now to fix the wrongs that had been done. He set out to find her and bring her back to her rightful place in his palace.
Alvina did not want to go, for although she in turn cared very much for the young man, she thought for certain all the court would laugh at her. But as the prince rode ahead and the moon began to glitter in the sky, the gooseherd whispered, "My dear Alvina, I have watched you grow from a forgotten child to the woman you are now. I have seen your compassion even when others did not offer it to you. I have seen you ragged and tired and cold, and yet come to me and dance. The music I gave you was my power, but the magic it brought you was your own. If you truly love this young man, then see yourself as he sees you. It is time to look beyond your own tatters and know that you are worthy of the love that is offered." He raised his flute again to his lips, and as he played a tune of courage, Alvina knew that he was right. She danced through her doubts, she danced through her fears, and pretty soon she found that she had not only arrived at the grand doors where the ball was held, but had flung them open without hesitation.
King Dushyant called for his horse, and without hesitating, rode swiftly towards the forest where he had once hunted, letting his love for Shakuntala guide him. After many days and many nights of riding, he came upon the outskirts of a small village and was surprised to see a small boy boldly counting the teeth of a lion, saying to it, "O brave king of the jungle, open your mouth wide and show us your mighty power."
The lords and ladies of the court were aghast as a cacophony of white feathers and silvery music burst into the hall. But their blind outrage did not diminish the prince's love or his resolve. "My good friends and family," he announced, silencing them, "you may look at this lady and see only a goose girl, I have traveled with her and talked with her and know her to be far more than the petticoat she wears. If you wish for me to find a good queen, unselfish and true, then you must look no further. My only wish is that she might accept my hand.
King Dushyant was amazed by the child's bravery and how the lion did not hurt him. The king asked the boy who he was, and the boy replied that he was the son of Shakuntala and the king Dushyant. The king knew immediately this must be true, and so he followed his son and the lion to the edge of the village. The Navratri festival had just begun, and everywhere people were feasting on food, fragrant with spices, and dancing to music that moved both body and soul. There, in the center, Shakuntala tended the lamp for the goddess Durga. Time, though spent in sadness, had been good to her. And even in her simple attire, she had a new assurance about her that well befitted a queen.
Seeing how faithful the prince had been, and how readily he championed her, Alvina took his hand. The gooseherd once more brought his flute to his lips, playing a new tune that sounded like the singing of birds, and Alvina and the prince began to dance.
The sounds of celebration quieted as Bharata led his father, the king, to where Shakuntala stood. Dushyant took a knee before her. I have remembered our time together and my love for you. Just as you promised, Durga has brought me to you, and I will not underestimate her power or yours ever again. Take this ring that has been restored to me as a symbol of my love and respect.
Alvina turned to thank her old friend and invite him to stay at court, but the gooseherd had vanished. Back at the house by the sea, a new music played, low and stirring, and as the merchant listened, his heart softened, and he began to cry. He cried for his lost love and the daughter he had missed. And after a while, he dried his tears. He called for the few servants that were left to trim his beard and bring him water to wash with and clean clothes to wear. He saddled his horse and rode swiftly to the palace celebrations.
Satisfied that his heart was true, Shakuntala accepted the king's renewed vows. With the ring returned to her hand, she and her son were led to the palace on the king's best steed, surrounded by people dancing and singing the praises to the new queen.
Alvina's father arrived on her wedding day to see her rags transformed into a glimmering satin gown, with jewels at her throat and a golden crown on her head. He knelt at her feet and offered her a string of pearls that had been her mother's, which she treasured more than any jewel.
King Dushyant never again forgot his promises to Shakuntala, and together they ruled with strength and love. Their wisdom was passed to their son and the many generations after him.
While Alvina learned to forgive those who had treated her poorly, she never forgot what loneliness felt like. And so, as queen, she made sure that all of the children of the kingdom were well cared for, so that none would ever be called tattercoats again. There is more to beauty than fine dresses and shoes.
And more to love than a promise and a ring.
Some kinds of magic come from within.
And some transformations take time to let grow.
The fields,
The forest,
the music,
the ring,
the friendship,
the journey,
the courage,
the love.
a continent apart.
And yet so familiar.
And so are we.
The stories remember.
And so
Shall we?